All right. Now, I'm not sure if this person is a believer and a brother in the Lord or not, so I'm going to watch my tone. But first of all, this statement is biblically inaccurate, it's doctrinally incorrect, and it's theologically unsound. Basically, it is ignorant and unlearned. Faith is not a in case of emergency break glass option. We are called to live by faith. So much so that faith, along with prayer and worship, are not just essential to what we do, they are core to who we are. Second, faith does not require us to go against reason nor logic. Faith does require us to go against fear, doubt, and unbelief. And yes, there is a difference. Some may see it as a subtle difference. Some may see it as a ginormous difference, but all should see it. There is no excuse for not seeing the difference. Listen, there is always a reason for faith. There is always a reason for hope. Romans, Galatians, and Hebrews form a trilogy on one subject. Shout out to Chuck Missler, the elder. You are sorely missed, sir. Again, they form a trilogy on one subject. And that subject is, how shall the just live? Answer, by faith. Romans answers the question of who are the just. Galatians answers the question of how then shall they live? Answer, by faith. Hebrews answers the question of what is faith. The theme of the book of Hebrews is holding on to the faith. Hebrews is a legal treatise. The writer is presenting a defense for the faith. Listen, he is presenting the evidence for faith. And Exhibit A are the scriptures themselves. The number one reason, the foundation for faith, are the scriptures themselves. Now, let me say this. When you're listening to people on this app or in church or wherever, you have to determine if that person is a believer or a scoffer or not. Some people pretend like they're bringing clarity to the scriptures. They're not. They're trying to undermine the scriptures, thereby undermining your faith. I'm not even talking to this dude. I'm talking to believers. So when someone says there's no evidence for, and they throw out, well, the 500 witnesses, what they're really saying is that the Bible is wrong. What they're really saying is that the Apostle Paul is a liar and that God himself is a liar. They may not word it that way, but when you use logic and reason, you come to that conclusion. And if you're a believer and you want to determine should you even be listening to it or not, all you got to do is ask them, who is Jesus? Did Jesus come in the flesh? If they don't answer that in the affirmative, they are the spirit of the Antichrist. Apostle John told us about that. But I digress. Back to the subject at hand. In my personal walk, two things impact, inform, and influence my faith. They are the scriptures and my personal experience. In other words, my testimony, what I have been through. Listen, we serve a God whom we cannot see. So oftentimes, he will condescend and allow us to feel him. Listen, there are times when I'm going through something and it gets intense, and I need to remind myself of who God is and what God has already done in my life. Because the same God who brought me through the last time is the same God that's going to bring me through this time and every time. I have a reason for faith. I'm trying to watch my tone. As you can see, I'm losing. Now, my experience does not shape how I see the Bible. The Bible shapes my perspective on how I see my experiences. So now, the book of Hebrews. The writer is writing to a group of believers for considering abandoning the faith in order to avoid persecution. Hence the verse, how shall you escape if you neglect so great a salvation? And listen, they're considering abandoning the faith temporarily, and they're going to return to it once the persecution is over. That's what they're telling themselves. So now, because things have gotten hard, they're questioning God. So basically, they put God himself on trial. And the charge against God is God faithful? So again, Exhibit A for reason to hope are the scriptures. Now, in chapter 11, people call that the Hall of Faith. For some reason, I still ain't figured that out. What you actually have is the writer's witness list. It is a list of those who have been summoned to answer the charge against God. Is God faithful? And the first witness he calls is creation itself. By faith, we understand that God framed the worlds. Now, once creation starts testifying to the glory of God, it's all but over at that point. Everybody else he calls after that is just piling on. And notice, he doesn't run out of witnesses. He runs out of time. So he's making an appeal to the court to concede that, hey, everybody I'm going to call is going to testify to the same thing, that, yeah, God is faithful, and that they had a reason for their faith. Now, in chapter 10, because I'm way ahead of myself. Now, in chapter 10, the tenor, the tone, and the tempo of the letter changes. About 2/3 of the way through that chapter, the writer begins to close. He's closing. It's B flat all the way. He's starting to hoop for the uninitiated. And he begins to speak in what is called the imperative. That's in chapter 10. In chapter 11, he changes keys and he begins to speak in the indicative. In chapter 12, he switches back to the imperative. Imperative, indicative, imperative. Imperative. He's telling them to do something. In chapter 12, he explains why they should do it. In chapter 12, he tells them, now do it. What's he telling them? Remember, the theme of the letter is to hold on to your faith. In chapter 10, he's saying, hold on. In chapter 11, he's saying, here's why you hold on. Chapter 12, now hold on. Imperative, indicative, imperative. Hold on. Here's why you hold on. Now hold on. He gives them a reason to hold on. So now, chapter 11, the reason for faith. In chapter 11, the writer gives a legal textbook definition for what faith is. It's a play on words. Listen, he legally defines faith. Faith and law should cancel each other out. So by legally defining faith, it's a play on words. The entire definition is a play on words. It's a pun. Now, it's a play on words that contains several smaller plays on words, all of which get lost in translation. Hence, comments like this. He says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's not what that says in the original Greek. A better understanding of the passage is, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the validation of our faith being what has already been accomplished, and even now is still being accomplished. And these things are not casually observed. He's not saying you can't see what's been done. He said there's a way to see it. We're going to pick this up in the next part. I'm going to try to calm down. But don't bet on it. Yeah, and I'm probably going to block this dude too.